Back on the 10th, Fox News personality Jeanine Pirro, the judge, went on a hate-filled, pro-genocide tirade on her show, lasting about 7 minutes. In this entire broadcast, or at least in this section alone, she ignorantly called for the death of all Muslims, or at least all Arabs, without even realizing it. And not only did she do so, she went on to defend it, claiming that political correctness was killing the country and allowing Islamists to continue, because she literally could not tell the difference between radical Islam and regular Muslims. According to her, any criticism of regular Muslims, any criticism of radical Islam, she just lumps them both together, so she can't differentiate between being prejudiced against Muslims and criticizing radical Islam. I present to you in full her entire hate-filled speech.
We need to kill them. We need to kill them. The radical Muslim terrorists hell-bent on killing us. You're in danger. I'm in danger. We're at war, and this is not going to stop. After this week's brutal terror attacks in France, hopefully everybody now gets it. And there's only one group that can stop this war: the Muslims themselves. Our job is to arm those Muslims to the teeth, give them everything they need to take out these Islamic fanatics. Let them do the job.
Asking to arm Muslims against other Muslims is an absolutely wrong thing to do. And in fact, that is what the United States has always done. Look at the overthrow of the Shah of Iran, the arming of Iraq and Iran against each other. How many people died in that conflict as they supplied arms to two groups of Muslims? How about all the money they give to Saudi Arabia or any of the other countries in the Middle East that serve as essentially U.S. puppets? How many weapons have been sold to them to fight extremists and so-called extremists? The history of the United States arming Muslims against Muslims is actually very long, and it has been a major contributing factor to the rise of radical Islam. Like, for example, giving untold amounts of cash and weapons to the jihadists against the Soviet Union. They basically formed Al-Qaeda out of that. That's just one instance where the United States has funded Muslims. Not necessarily Muslims against Muslims, because they have done that too. But that's one example of how it has backfired so well.
It is time for this to be over, and stop sending American dollars to any Arab country that does not support this mission. Pakistan at the top of the list.
Actually, Pakistan has been fighting against radical Islamic militants for decades. In fact, Pakistan has been a very big ally of the United States in the war on terror, and has made contributions to fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan. And this statement by her is entirely ignorant. Pakistan, for the most part, has carried out U.S. wishes to the T. They've been an ally of the United States in fighting radical Islam in the country, including, as I said, their major contribution to fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan by trying to secure its borders from the fighters moving back and forth. In this instance, she clearly has no idea what she's talking about.
Force Arab nations to choose. They're either with us or they're against us. And stop with this nuclear negotiation nonsense. They don't operate the way we do. You can't negotiate, you can't mediate, and you can't bargain. You can't even reason with these people. Now, Egyptian President El-Sisi, a Muslim, in a country 85% Muslim, rid Egypt, the largest Arab country, of these Islamic fanatics. He threw out Hamas terrorists and outlawed the Muslim Brotherhood, the mother of all terrorist organizations. And ironically, days before the attack in France, that same President El-Sisi called for a religious revolution to take out the violent jihadists. He called on the imams and the religious establishment to lead the fight, saying the entire world is waiting for their next move. Now, I've been telling you for a year that they're coming for us, that there is a reverse crusade in progress, a Christian genocide, hundreds of thousands of innocents killed in the Middle East. And 7 months ago, I said that we need to bomb ISIS as it began its steamroll through Iraq. Bomb them, and bomb them again, for which I was roundly criticized.
Now, in this statement, we begin to see the real face of what all of this is about. Nothing more than the victim complex of the top of the imperialist pyramid. She genuinely believes that this is like some kind of jihad to wipe out Christianity. In truth, it is a jihad to wipe out all religions. Every single religion that's within their grasp, they try to destroy. But in the minds of Fox News, in the minds of America, in the minds of the white colonizers at the top of the pyramid, of the global pyramid of capital, it is all about them. This is all about getting rid of their religion, their beliefs. When in truth, it's about getting rid of all of them. But the entire focus is on them. The most privileged society in the entire world is the victim. And that is the very large point of this entire broadcast.
Our country's response to this threat? The FBI destroys tens of thousands of documents deemed offensive to Islam. The CIA removes the word Islamic before terrorist in those Benghazi talking points. The Fort Hood massacre, the Oklahoma beheading, both workplace violence.
The Fort Hood shooting is an incident that was workplace violence despite what she said. Yes, the man killed people and he was Muslim and he screamed Allahu Akbar. But she's forgetting the reason why he attacked them to begin with. He was a member of the U.S. military. He was part of the mechanism that helped carry out killing radical Islam, or in truth, murdering the third world. Why did he shoot them? He said because he was tortured. It was discovered that he was tortured constantly for being a Muslim. He was insulted, put down, possibly passed over for promotion. He was constantly attacked for being a Muslim. It's very typical that someone at Fox News, particularly a white person at Fox News, wouldn't understand the kind of emotional and mental trauma that comes from systemic oppression, particularly prejudice like that, and how that can lead to someone losing their mind. If it's day after day after day, after people who are killing the people that they are claiming that he is with. Now put all of that together and you see how this workplace stress, which is what it was. He wasn't a radical Islamist. He lost his mind because of the torture that he was suffering at the hands of people like Jeanine Pirro. That was workplace violence. It was not an act of radical Islamic fundamentalism. It was workplace violence. It was the inevitable result of systemic prejudice against someone. When you have a racist, prejudiced society, things like this are going to happen sooner or later.
Are we morons?
Yes.
Of course, none of this should be a surprise, given that our president invited the Muslim Brotherhood to fill the first 2 rows of his apology for being an American speech in Cairo in 2009. And as we cower to these Islamic fanatics, our president and former Secretary of State Clinton say they will prosecute the man who made the video. Free speech be damned. They call murders accompanied by Allah Akbar workplace violence. This surrender is nothing more than a coward's response to the fear of this fanatical terrorism. And this political correctness will be the death of us. They can kill us, but we can't hurt their feelings? I'm surprised the president hasn't signed a new executive order that simply says, don't offend Muslims.
Again, we return to the issue of self-victimization. We are victimized by political correctness. We are being killed by political correctness. This is essentially what she's saying. Her ability not to attack Muslims is getting her killed and getting Americans killed. Those with the greatest amount of power in society, particularly someone in the media who has such an incredible reach, is a victim. Why? Because she is unable to differentiate the difference between attacking everyday regular Muslims and radical Islam. What is not allowed is attacking all Muslims for the actions of some radicals. That's what she can't understand. But because in her racist mind, and the racist minds of people like her, prejudiced, whatever you want to call it, all Muslims are the same. Therefore, if you're not allowed to criticize the regular everyday Muslim that is not carrying these things out, you are therefore not being allowed to criticize any Islam. And that's where it all falls apart. But because, once again, because she cannot understand this, it becomes she's the victim. Because she can't go around attacking Muslims. Simply because they can't tell the difference between attacking innocent people and guilty people. Well, let me ask the question. Where does her political incorrectness get us? Right down to the genocide that she is openly calling for.
And make no mistake, as sure as I'm talking to you, there will be efforts to limit our First Amendment, our free speech, to comply with Sharia blasphemy laws which call for death to those who slander the Prophet Muhammad. And at a time when we have never been in more danger, our president is focused on free community college, on his continuing march to reduce the size of the military and eviscerate our national security. Our government's response to the terror threat is to have an interfaith dialogue to try to understand and empathize with the enemy. And when they want to shut us up, they call us Islamophobes. Muslim groups like CARE and the Nation of Islam have been integrated into our society. Muslims invited to worship at our national cathedral in Washington, D.C. We're directed by a political correctness that is so bizarre, so disconnected from reality that it does nothing but assist our enemy in our own destruction. They have conquered us through immigration. They have conquered us through interfaith dialogue. And they have conquered us by co-opting our leaders into a position of embarrassment.
Oh, right. The American empire has already been overthrown. The entire global structure of imperial capital has already been defeated. Radical Islam has already come in, completely taken over, and is completely running the place. And apparently has control of the coercive arm of the bourgeois state, like sending the troops to fight Muslims in the Middle East. Or to fight themselves, apparently. Again, this ridiculous notion that they are the victim. To say radical Islam has defeated America is insane. Who has the gigantic media outlets to call for Christian crusades? Look at just anything off of Right-Wing Watch. And the lunatic Christian pastors who have gigantic audiences calling for the most insane things possible, constantly denouncing the president for supposedly being a Muslim and his wife a man for some reason. And yet we're supposed to believe that these radical Islamists have somehow defeated the largest empire in history? It's absolutely ridiculous, and it is a complete delusion of people who themselves believe that they are a victim, when in fact they are the global perpetrator.
Now, the Prime Minister of France just a few hours ago stated that France is at war with radical Islam. Why can't our president even say the words radical Islam or Islamic terrorist, let alone protect us Americans? It's not like we haven't been, that we haven't suffered from these fanatical terrorists. Thousands of Americans have died at their hands. the World Trade Center, the USS Cole, Tanzania, Fort Hood, Benghazi.
Just one quick correction there. You created the radical Islam in Libya. Radical Islam in Libya was relatively nothing, and in fact was probably non-existent. It was the actions of the United States funding them against Gaddafi, which is what created them, and that started that whole entire mess. So you really ought to get your facts straight on that one.
But when the head of MI5, one of the most secretive positions, shows his face to the world saying that Britain is going to get hit next, it is time to get serious. And as this Islamic cancer metastasizes throughout the world, Boko Haram in Nigeria, Al-Shabaab in Somalia, Ansar al-Sharia in Libya, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and as it goes through Europe, it is headed our way. Our forefathers gave up everything, their fortunes, their families, their lives, to create a government where free speech and freedom of religion were sacrosanct.
Once again, we return to this idea of American victimhood. They really believed the Founding Fathers gave up their families, their fortunes, and everything so that they could have freedom. They legitimately believed that that's what the American Revolution was about. Believe it or not, actually the American Revolution was largely a political and economic thing. Believe it or not, it actually had a large part to do with capitalism and the ownership of funds that are generated from its use. They did not want to pay taxes to the king. That actually was a large part of it. The very largest and the wealthiest in the United States didn't want to pay taxes to the British Crown. Really? Capitalists be against having to pay taxes? Is that somehow something that's completely unbelievable? Again, there's way more to the American Revolution. But this notion that it was all about freedom is absolutely false. This was a political and economic move for the benefit of the ruling class within the United States of America. In a manner of speaking, it was a contradiction between ruling classes, the ruling class in England and the ruling class inside the United States. And when their interests clashed so heavily, it broke out into a war, which, in this case, the United States, or the national bourgeois, won.
This surrender, this refusal to even call it what it is an insult to my father and my grandfather and everyone who served in the armed forces, who fought to protect what is sacred to every American. Yes, it is time for this to be over.
Now, if this is what your grandfather, your grandfather's grandfather, your grandfather's grandfather's grandfather fought for, is your noble white heritage on the stolen land, if this is what they really fought for, then I spit on them. Because we know damn well that that is not what America's wars have been about. Wars have never been about freedom. Civil wars have been about freedom. Insurrections have been about freedom. But wars have largely, almost exclusively been about conquest, which is why they happen. Do you think that the U.S. war was really, the U.S. contribution to World War II was actually about stopping Hitler? It was about protecting U.S. interests inside of what was a global conflict. Do you really believe that U.S. involvement in the Korean War was about liberating Korea? No. It was about maintaining capitalism in the South, maintaining its holdings in the South, attempting to maintain as much spheres of influence globally as it could. Do you think the Vietnam War was about freedom? The Vietnam War was entirely about maintaining control of South Vietnam. To even say that American wars have been about freedom is completely fraudulent. And no respected academic is really going to believe that. And you don't even need to be an academic to even see that. But once again, she is making Americans out to be victims. Everybody who has ever served is all about this. And Obama is trying to destroy this with the most ridiculous of arguments. They are trying to make it look like all their sacrifices, which have been far from altruistic, even if they were in their own minds, from being destroyed, making people who are dead, who have died for the empire, out to be victims again. As the United States continues to victimize people hundreds of years later, they are still making out those who have died in defense of that same empire out to be victims in order to justify more conquest. Her words here are entirely hollow, entirely hate-filled and ignorant. Now here's one of the most interesting. She believes that the Islamists have already won. They've already defeated them by immigration. Now have no illusion, we know what she means by they have won by immigration. She means we've allowed dark-skinned people to move into our country. This is nothing more than an attempt to link radical Islam to the immigration issue. That is dishonest, it's disgusting, and it's frankly an insult to journalism. Fox News is an insult to journalism in general, but I digress. That's what this is. This is the xenophobia of Fox News and the white colonialist mentality of the United States playing its part. Oh, the Muslims are taking over by moving here. Hey, did you know that the whites took over by moving here? Are we going to do anything about that? No? Okay. And that's what this is about. This is about preventing immigration. This link to it is absolutely psychotic. It makes no sense. And this is nothing more than a hate-filled diatribe by her. To actually link radical Islam to immigration, that she's calling for genocide. Think about what she's saying. Immigration needs to be stopped because that's where they're coming from. This is essentially kick brown people out of the country logic. And that's exactly what's being done here. In the end, we saw exactly what this was. A gigantic victim complex. The people in the United States with the most amount of power, the most amount of influence, who stand on top of the global pyramid of capital, claiming themselves to be victims. The whole world is against them. Boo-hoo, everybody hates us because we're successful and we're so great. And the radical Islamists are only killing us because we've been successful and they haven't. Or they're only trying to kill us because we're Christian and they're Muslim. In the eyes of people like this, they can't even see the world in terms of a series of economic interests, political influence, or hell, within the context of imperialism. The context in which all this radical Islam exists is non-existent. It is all about America as victim. There is no why, there is no how, there is only we are victimized, we have to do something now. It is not placed in any kind of context, whether it be political, economic, imperial, or even historical. Even something as simple as historical. It is all about the self-victimization complex of white Americans. And that this is all that is about. Her diatribe here, her rant, calling for genocide against Muslims, is nothing more than her own self-delusion of victimhood. And in fact, I'd say that's probably what all of Fox News actually is. If you like this video and you'd like to see more of them, then head over to my Patreon page and show your support. Or you can go to the MRN bookstore and check out some of the latest books available. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, and share on various social media.